I'm not sure if you've noticed that we tend to live in a very pressured and polarized society, a world where you have to get things right. And beyond that, you often have to get everything right on the very first try. That failure is often seen not to be an option. And that if you don't get everything right on the first try, sometimes there's some dire consequences. I choose to look at things in a different light. And while I know it's important to get things right, sometimes, actually a lot of times, I fail. And that's okay. Because for me, fail, F-A-I-L, has simply become an acronym. One that diametrically changes the way that I look at failure. Fail, F-A-I-L, simply stands for first attempt in learning. That it's not about getting it right on the first try. It's about getting it right at some point going forward. Sometimes I just need to try again. And sometimes I just need to ask for a do-over. As I look back on my years, this concept, this notion of a do-over has been present in my life for far longer than I could ever imagine. I grew up in an Irish Catholic matriarchal dictatorship. Thanks, Mom. Catholicism, if nothing else, afforded me the opportunity to make amends for my shortcomings, to ask for forgiveness, and to do better and to be more mindful in the future. And on my path to becoming an Eagle Scout, my scoutmaster and mentor, Jerry Rudolph, instilled in me the mantra that there is always room for improvement. That starting over or doing things better than next time promoted healthy self-assessment, growth, and maybe more importantly, learning. That it wasn't about getting it right the first time, that it's about getting it right at some point going forward. And God only knows, although my friends will attest for sure, that my golf game, or at the very least my golf score, has benefited from a breakfast ball or a mulligan or two over the course of 18 holes on the links. At Drury High School here in North Adams, I have the honor and the privilege to work with high school and middle school students every day. Let me tell you that the enigma of adolescence is alive and well. At Drury, we teach the 3 traditional R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, while we simultaneously teach the 3 modern R's of respect and responsibility and resilience. My work as a school adjustment counselor allows me to teach the do-over every single day. We offer mediation to young people in the midst of relationship problems that helps them repair those connections in a way that their post-millennial technological brains can understand. That even with that relationship, we simply restore to default settings. There are other times when this do-over is more in the moment. My students sometimes enter my room with the same bluster and the same frenetic energy as Cosmos Kramer entering Jerry Seinfeld's apartment. They are barely in the door, they're ranting and they're raving, and they are incredibly dysregulated. There is no casual conversation, there is no greeting. There is just unbridled energy. And when they come in the door, it goes like this: Mr. Smith, I need to talk about my math teacher. My math teacher's driving me crazy. And I simply say, stop. We're going to do it over. I ask for a do-over. And what I tell them is I'm going to have them leave the room, turn around, and come back in the room. And when they come back in the room, the only thing that I ask of them is that they just greet the people in the room. I get a lot of puzzled looks. I get a lot of shaking of heads. And they are befuddled at what I'm asking. But it's in acquiescing to my request that their bewilderment starts to lessen. In their confusion, ironically, they begin to slow down. They begin to re-regulate. So when they come back in the room, and don't get me wrong, they feign these conversations. Hi, Mr. Smith. Hey, Josh, how are you? It's really good to see you. It's really good to see you too. Josh, you look like something's bothering you. What can I help you with? I'm having some problems with my math teacher, and I wonder if you could just help me. It's in this moment of re-regulation that now these conversations can be fruitful, that they can be positive, and we can talk about things like healthy decision-making and good problem solving so that they can be better and they can enhance the connections with the people that are important to them. Beyond that, we model this do-over every single day. And we do it by modeling for children that they are safe and well in our school and that they get a fresh, clean slate every single day. They get a do-over every single day. What we're striving for here is to teach them that even in relationships, that it's progress, not perfection, that's important. There was a Harvard University study called The Science of Resilience, and it put forth that it's the presence and power of one strong, healthy adult relationship in the lives of young people, even our most vulnerable population, that develops resiliency in them. At Drury, what we're trying to do is we're trying to build that resilience and build those relationships. Those relationships become critical to their well-being. Sometimes I hearken back to my teenage years, and actually, I have some fondness. I have great memories of playing baseball at Newell Park in Weymouth, Massachusetts. There were no adults. There were no umpires. We had no uniforms. We were just a bunch of ragtag teenagers having fun playing ball. Sometimes I want to go back to those days. I remember one day in particular. It was 3-2. It was the bottom of the ninth. There were 2 outs. We were behind, and there were runners on second and third. And I came to bat. I dug into that batter's box, and I got to face Stevie Lund, who was probably the best pitcher in the neighborhood. I fouled off a couple of pitches, and then I hit a ground ball single right down the third base line. 2 runs score. Our team wins, at least in the moment. Because as I rounded first base, pumping my fist, jubilant, over on third base, Michael Joyce yells out, "Foul ball!" And I yell back, "Fair ball!" And Juice and I went back and forth, foul, fair, foul, fair, foul, fair. It had been a really close call. Juice and I were sticking to our assertions. There was no umpire and there was no adult to mediate our dispute. So we did what had become the rule of every single game that we ever played in our Idlewild neighborhood. We reached consensus that we had to play the play again. We reached consensus for a do-over. So I got back into that box. I dug in again, and I faced Stevie Lund. Now, I could tell you that heroically I made another hit, and that my team won, and that I was jubilantly carried off on the shoulders of my teammates. But, like Mighty Casey at the bat, I struck out. Game over. This do-over, as difficult as it was at times, preserved our friendships and maintained the integrity of our community. So it's about relationships, it's about connection, it's about integrity. But the do-over requires a high degree of vulnerability. And it requires that high degree of vulnerability, which unfortunately is sometimes seen as weakness, because we have to admit that we were wrong in some way, that we have an accountability in things not going right. And in a world where getting it right is so important, vulnerability becomes dangerous to our ego because it exposes us as being flawed. But ironically, it's in that vulnerability that's when change happens. In March 2013, my brother, Father Brian Smith, was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. Our family rallied together and we held regular meetings with oncologists and palliative care providers to talk about what had become an incredibly rapid progression of his cancer. I regularly made the trip from Connecticut to Brigham and Women's Hospital to see my brother. He had a G-tube that exited from his nose that drained the stomach fluids and acids from his stomach. He was gaunt. He had lost a lot of weight, and his complexion was ashen. My brother was dying right in front of me. It was on one of those occasions on a late afternoon where I visited him that I met Molly Malone. She was a second shift oncology nurse who was working at Brigham and Women's Hospital. Molly Malone. I am not sure if there is a more Irish name for a nurse in Boston than Molly Malone. Every time I reference her, I say her first and her last name, Molly Malone. It just rolls off my tongue. As I was leaving that night and I walked past the nurse's station, Molly Malone said to me, "Hey, how does your brother look?" It had been a really long day. It was really difficult to see my brother in his current state, and frankly, I was exhausted. And I didn't respond, but rather I reacted. I said, "How does my brother look? He looks like shit. He has cancer all throughout his body, and it's hard to see him this way." Molly Malone said, "I'm so sorry. I hope you have a good night." So I got in the car, prepared to take my half-hour trip to my mom's on the Southeast Expressway in Boston. And I had plenty of time during that ride to think about my brother's plight, to think about the trajectory of this insidious disease that was killing him. I also had plenty of time to think about my initial interaction with Molly Malone, and that it hadn't gone so well. I also had plenty of time to think about what a jerk I was. That here was the person providing care for my brother, tending to his pain, managing him, and taking care of him, and I reacted like that. When I got home to my mom's, I was, as I always am, warmly greeted. When I got to my mom's, as always, I was offered a hot cup of tea. But I said to my mom, "I got something I have to do first." And I got on the phone and I called the 7th floor of the Brigham and Women's Hospital. And I asked for Molly Malone. I said, "Molly, do me a favor, ask me how my brother looks." And she was a little bit confused. She said, "What?" I said, "Just ask me how my brother looks the second time." And she said, "Why?" I said, "Molly, please, just do me a favor and ask me how my brother looks." And she said, "Okay, how does your brother look?" So here was my opportunity to get things right. Here was my opportunity for the do-over. And this time, this is what I said. "Hey, Molly, my brother doesn't look so well physically right now, but it's because of your care and your love and your compassion and your tenderness that he looks amazing. And I just wanted to thank you for taking such good care of him." I think I heard Molly Malone's voice quiver a little bit on the other end of the phone. I think maybe she teared up a little bit. She promptly said, "Thank you, I have to go tend to some other patients." And I know that as I hung up the phone, a tear streamed down my cheek. But it wasn't a sad teardrop. I had made things right. I was vulnerable. I was accountable. And I was courageous. But far more importantly, now with Molly Malone, I was connected. I am not sure how Molly Malone felt about our initial interaction, but I know how I felt. And I also know how I felt when I redid things, when I asked for a do-over and I made things right. There's a dichotomy in all of this. The dichotomy is the do-over is so simplistic, yet it is so complex. Simplistically, I like to think that it's a math equation and that it looks like this, that remorse plus hope plus vulnerability times courage equals connection. That I have to put myself out there, that I have to be vulnerable, that I have to admit that things didn't go right, and that I played a part, that I was accountable in that process. And then, after all that, I have to muster the courage to bring forth a subject that I already feel that I screwed up or I feel really badly about. And then, when I do muster that courage, and I go forth and I have that conversation, it might not work. And it might not work because we're not dealing with numbers and equations and formulas. We're dealing with raw human emotion in some of these situations. Emotions like frustration and confusion and anger and fear and worry and shame and guilt. In math, those things are called variables. And I know that somewhere my 11th grade math teacher, Mr. Knowles, is really proud that I remembered that. But it's these variables that make this process so very, very difficult. So why should we do it? Why should we be vulnerable? And why should we put ourselves out there? We should do it because human relationships are key to our emotional and physical well-being. That regret is the one thing the do-over reduces and instills a connection in those that are important to us. It's that connection that I know when I'm connected with people that my world and this whole world is a far better place. So when things don't go exactly right for you, and I'm sure it will happen, I now offer you. No, you can now offer yourself the do-over. Peace.